At my engagement party, my fiancé was suddenly replaced by 5 identical-looking strangers. Chloe, aren't you face blind? If you can find me among them, the wedding goes on as planned. Tristan's voice dripped with cold amusement from the recording playing in my earpiece. But if you guess wrong, the wedding is off. I don't want a wife who can only recognize her husband by sniffing his clothes like a dog. I stood there, clutching the bouquet. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the faces of the 5 men standing in front of me, because I knew, without a doubt, that Tristan was not among them. Just as I was about to make an excuse to slip away, the audio file automatically played the next clip. Tristan, if Chloe finds out you ditched her own engagement party to get a marriage certificate with Sienna, won't she? A friend's voice asked on the recording. Tristan interrupted him, his tone sharp and impatient. Sienna has late-stage cancer. Her last wish in this life is to marry me. How could I say no to her? As for Chloe, she's been chasing me for 10 years. She's too obsessed with me to ever break up over something like this. My heart shattered. The white roses in my hands slipped through my fingers, scattering across the polished floor. So from the very beginning, Tristan never intended to marry me. If that was the case, I would gladly step aside. I raised my hand and pointed directly at one of the 5 men. Excuse me, I said, my voice shaking but clear. Would you marry me instead? The banquet hall erupted into a frenzy of whispers. The man I pointed at froze. Then, a low chuckle escaped his lips as the other 4 men quickly backed away. Miss Vance, I am definitely not Tristan. I lowered my gaze, digging my fingernails deep into my palms. I know, but can you help me play along? I will pay you. Once this is over, if you want a divorce, I will agree immediately. The man stared at me for a long beat. Then he pulled a sleek diamond ring from his pocket and slowly, deliberately, slid it onto my ring finger. Deal, he whispered. He leaned down, his voice brushing against my ear. But as for the payment, I'll decide the price later. A strange, inexplicably familiar scent drifted from him, but my mind was too chaotic to place it. The wedding will be in 7 days. I'll pick you up then. I blinked in surprise but nodded anyway. After all, the sooner this nightmare ended, the better. By the time I managed to escape the prying questions of the guests, night had fallen. I returned to the penthouse I shared with Tristan. As expected, it was dead silent. He hadn't come home. I let out a long sigh, massaging my aching legs, and collapsed onto the sofa. I figured I should at least let him know. In 7 days, I was getting married too. I unlocked my phone. Tristan hadn't replied to a single one of my Snapchats. With trembling fingers, I opened Instagram. A bright red marriage certificate flashed on my screen, burning my eyes. Sienna had posted it. My days are numbered, but at least I get to stand by his side as his wife at the very end. No regrets. In the photo, Tristan was smiling so gently, his eyes crinkled with warmth, though the rims were slightly red, as if he had just cried. The screen went dark, then lit up again. No matter how much I wanted to deny it, it was real. Sienna, my once best friend who had fled to Europe 3 years ago after her family went bankrupt, was now Tristan's wife. Suddenly, a loud, frantic knocking rattled the front door. I quickly grabbed a tissue, wiped my tears, and dragged my exhausted body to open it. Tristan stood on the threshold. Rainwater was dripping from his hair, but his arms were wrapped tightly around someone else. Chloe, there are bags in the trunk. Hurry up and bring them up for me. Before I could even speak, Tristan pushed past me, carrying Sienna up the stairs toward the master bedroom. By the time I dragged the last heavy suitcase inside, I was soaked to the bone and shivering violently from the cold. Chloe, thank you so much for bringing our bags up. You must be freezing. I snapped my head up. A sickeningly sweet scent of expensive perfume hit my nose. Sienna's face was painted pale, but her makeup was flawless. Not a single strand of her hair was wet. She held out a warm mug of cocoa toward me. Drink this quickly. We don't want you catching a cold. Tristan frowned, immediately guiding Sienna to sit on the sofa. Don't worry about her. A little rain won't kill her. Sit down, Sienna. I'll make you some porridge in a minute. My hand trembled, spilling some of the hot cocoa onto my skin. It burned, leaving a bright red mark on my wrist. Did I have to be dying to deserve his concern? Or was I just not worth it to him? Chloe, there's something I need to tell you, Tristan said, holding Sienna as if she were a fragile glass doll that would shatter at any moment. Sienna has terminal cancer. For the short time she has left, we are going to take care of her. I stood frozen, holding the mug like a statue. When did you get diagnosed? My voice was so hoarse I barely recognized it. Sienna coughed weakly into a tissue. Just this month. It was detected very late. I wasn't going to tell you. I didn't want to ruin your engagement party. But the pain became too much, and I didn't have anyone else to turn to in Europe. So I called Tristan. I didn't expect him to fly over and drop everything. Chloe, you aren't mad, are you? Watching Sienna lean weakly against Tristan's chest felt completely surreal. When we were 16, Sienna was the one who encouraged me to chase Tristan. She helped me lose weight, taught me how to do my makeup and planned accidental run-ins for us. And now, in less than 24 hours, she had married him behind my back, leaving me to be ridiculed at my own engagement party. Tristan let out a cold snort. Mad. What right does she have to be mad? She couldn't even recognize her own fiancé at the party. Does a woman like that even have the right to get angry? The memory of the humiliation from this morning flashed in my mind, making my knuckles turn white. So you two got married? Sienna suddenly choked on her drink. Tristan. I was just so happy. I forgot to hide my Instagram post from Chloe. It's fine. She was going to find out sooner or later anyway, Tristan said, rubbing her shoulder comfortingly. Chloe, since you already know, I won't lie to you. He lifted Sienna's left hand, showing off their matching platinum wedding bands. Sienna and I are legally married. For her remaining days, I will stand by her as her husband. Okay, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. Tristan blinked, a flash of surprise crossing his eyes. But I also have something to tell you. I continued, looking him dead in the eye. I'm getting married too. The living room fell into a dead silence. You? Married? Tristan's lips curled into a mocking smirk. Do you even know which man you're marrying? It doesn't matter. He recognizes me. And he doesn't play sick games to test me. Hearing this, Tristan burst into a harsh laugh. Stop playing around, Chloe. You've been obsessed with me for 10 years. Is there even another man in your life? You don't even have the social skills to meet anyone else. How are you going to get married? By spraying them with perfume so you can sniff your way to the altar. Sienna piped up in a soft, patronizing voice. Chloe, I know you're hurting, but you shouldn't lie about something like this. Tristan waved his hand dismissively, picking Sienna up in his arms. Chloe, I am Sienna's husband now. So you'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight. No, Tristan, please, Sienna protested weakly, clinging to his neck. I'm dying anyway. I don't want to ruin your relationship. I'll just sleep on the couch. Tristan only held her tighter. Sienna, you are my legal wife. This penthouse is your home. The mistress of the house does not sleep on the couch. With that, he walked straight into the master bedroom, closing the door without giving me a single backward glance. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the floor. I looked around the living room. Every single piece of furniture, every painting, every curtain had been carefully chosen by me for our future home. But in the end, there was no room for me in this house. I stumbled to my feet, heading to the kitchen cabinet to find some fever medicine. From the master bedroom, Tristan's soft, gentle murmurs drifted out. The bitter taste of the pill dissolved on my tongue. He had never once spoken to me in that tone. After a quick shower, I crawled into the small guest bed, wrapping the duvet tightly around myself. Just sleep, I told myself. In a few days, you'll leave this place forever. The next morning, I woke up just as the sun was rising. My head felt heavy and hot, but sleep was impossible. I walked out to the living room. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and I could hear Sienna's muffled voice from inside. Richard, I have a follow-up appointment in a few days. Make sure you forge the medical records perfectly. Swap my meds for vitamins. Tristan doesn't know anything about medicine. He believes whatever I say. Sienna's voice was low, but in the quiet morning, every word cut through the air like a knife. Once Tristan helps pay off my family's debts, you'll get a huge cut of the money. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I pushed the bathroom door wide open. Sienna gasped, her eyes widening in temporary panic. But she quickly recovered, hanging up the phone and casually dabbing pale foundation onto her face to make herself look sicker. Why? Why are you lying to him? I whispered, trying to keep my voice from cracking. Because I need the money, Sienna said, putting down her makeup brush and looking at her deathly pale reflection in the mirror with satisfaction. Honestly, I was surprised too. You chased him for 10 years, but all it took was one phone call from me for him to pay my debts and abandon you. I guess he never really loved you, did he? A metallic taste rose in my throat. Stop lying to him. I can help you pay your debts. Just stop this. Sienna stared at me, then burst into a mocking laugh. You? Help me? Chloe, did you forget? Before my family went bankrupt, we were worth 10 times what your family is. She stepped closer, looking down at me with pure disdain. Even if I have to live like a dog now, I don't need your pity. Suddenly, Tristan's voice echoed from the hallway. Sienna? Are you in there? Are you feeling okay? Sienna's eyes narrowed instantly. With a sudden violent sweep of her arm, she knocked all her cosmetics off the counter. Bottles shattered on the tile floor as she threw herself down, screaming. I'm sorry. Chloe. I know I don't have much time left. Once Tristan and I have our wedding, I'll go away and die in peace. I won't get in your way anymore. The bathroom door was kicked open with a loud bang. Tristan lunged inside, shoving me hard against the wall as he scooped a sobbing Sienna into his arms. Chloe. Sienna is supposed to be your best friend. How could you be so cruel? Tristan's voice suddenly cut off. Bright red blood began to drip onto the white tiles, pooling into a small puddle. My forehead had slammed against the sharp edge of the wall cabinet. My vision went blurry, and Tristan's face seemed to split into multiple overlapping shadows. Tristan's lips parted, a flash of pure guilt washing over his face. But his hands remained firmly wrapped around Sienna. I don't know how long I lay there before I managed to crawl out of the bathroom and onto the living room sofa. By the time Tristan came out of the bedroom, I was silently dabbing antiseptic on my cut. He walked over quickly, reaching out to take the cotton swab from my hand. I tilted my head, quietly dodging his touch. Tristan's hand froze in midair. He looked at me with a complicated expression. "I didn't mean to shove you that hard," he muttered, lowering his hand with a sigh. "I know your personality. You wouldn't have pushed her. But she doesn't have much time left, Chloe. Just go along with it and apologize to her, please." My hand froze. I looked at Tristan, feeling as if I was seeing him for the very first time. "Tristan," I said, taking a deep breath. "What if I told you Sienna doesn't have cancer?" Tristan stiffened. Then his gaze drifted away, his expression hardening. "Do you have to be this petty?" I turned my head away, refusing to say another word. Tristan stood there in silence for a moment before turning and walking into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he placed a steaming bowl of oatmeal in front of me. "Eat something. We're going to take Sienna to her wedding photo shoot later. After all, this might be the last time the three of us are together." I stared at the oatmeal, a wave of bitter nostalgia washing over me. During our freshman year of college, I got terribly sick. The doctors couldn't find the cause. My parents were stuck abroad on business, so Sienna used her family's connections to get me the best specialists. Tristan had brought me to his place to take care of me, ordering his chefs to make whatever I wanted. But back then, I threw up everything I ate. I was practically skin and bones. In a panic, Tristan, who had never stepped foot in a kitchen in his life, spent an entire day researching recipes until he managed to make a bowl of oatmeal that wasn't burnt. Back then, I was so touched by that simple bowl of oatmeal that I cried, promising myself I would stay by his side forever. But my 10 years of devotion had only earned me a double betrayal. "I'm not going," I said quietly. Tristan's face darkened. "Chloe, you two are legally married. What would I be doing there? Giving people a free show?" My voice was incredibly calm. Even I was surprised by how numb I felt. "I guess once you're completely drained of love, there's no room left for anger. Tristan, I'm ready. Can we go now?" Sienna stepped out of the bedroom, wearing a beautiful white dress, her eyes shining with excitement. Tristan stared at me for one last long second before turning around and walking out the door with Sienna. The penthouse fell silent. I reached up to touch my forehead. My skin felt burning hot. I couldn't stay here any longer. I swallowed a couple of fever reducers, grabbed my suitcase, and began packing my things. My head throbbed, and my breath felt like fire, but I didn't stop. I had to leave before they came back. "Chloe, are you leaving?" Sienna's voice suddenly echoed behind me. I kept packing, not even bothering to look back. "Chloe, can you hand me my perfume from the vanity?" "I forgot to pack it," Sienna asked, her voice dripping with sweet innocence. "Don't you have hands?" I replied coldly. Sienna gasped softly, a venomous look flashing across her face. I walked into the guest bedroom to grab my last jacket. Just as I turned around, a heavy mist of perfume was sprayed directly into my face. Sienna stood at the doorway, pressing the nozzle repeatedly, targeting my face. My lungs instantly seized. Every breath became a sharp, wheezing battle. "Oh dear, Chloe. What's wrong? You look so pale," Sienna mocked, tossing the perfume bottle into the trash can. The sweet smile on her face vanished, replaced by a cold sneer. I collapsed onto my knees, clutching my throat. My airway felt like it was being strangled by a wire. I could only make high-pitched, desperate wheezing sounds. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and Tristan's panicked voice echoed through the apartment. "Chloe, are you having an asthma attack?" Tristan finally looked terrified. He dashed to the medicine cabinet, frantically tossing bottles aside until he found my rescue inhaler. "Chloe, quick, use this." "Tristan, my stomach hurts. I think something is wrong," Sienna suddenly whimpered, clutching her abdomen and collapsing onto the floor. Tristan whipped his head around, his eyes darting frantically between me and Sienna. Finally, he clenched his teeth and threw the inhaler toward me. "Chloe, hang on. I'll call an ambulance for you." He scooped Sienna up in his arms and bolted out of the penthouse. He didn't look back. Not even once. I crawled desperately across the floor, my fingers trembling as I grabbed the inhaler. I shoved it into my mouth and pressed down. Nothing. I pressed it again, harder. Still nothing. It was completely empty. The plastic canister slipped from my hand, rolling into the dark corner under the cabinet. Cold sweat soaked my shirt. My lips were turning a dark shade of blue. My lungs screamed for oxygen, but no air would enter. As my vision began to fade into black, the ring on my finger suddenly flashed a bright, steady light. I let out a bitter, silent laugh. I guess I won't make it to the 7th day. In the hospital hallway, Tristan paced back and forth, clutching his phone. On his way to the hospital with Sienna, he had called a private medical team to rush to the penthouse. I left her the inhaler, and the doctors are on their way. She'll be fine, Tristan muttered to himself, trying to shake the image of my suffocating face from his mind. 30 minutes later, his phone rang. Mr. Carter, we searched the entire penthouse. Miss Vance is not here. The blood drained from Tristan's face. What do you mean she's not there? He roared into the phone. She was having an asthma attack. Where could she have gone? We don't know, sir. But when we arrived, the only thing we found was an empty inhaler on the floor. Tristan's head spun. He took 2 steps back, nearly losing his balance. Empty. How could it be empty? All the inhalers in the cabinet were brand new. Expand the search. Check every hospital emergency room in the city. Tristan opened his Snapchat chat with me. He realized I had sent him several messages the day before, none of which he had replied to. He dialed my number. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. His hand shook violently. He redialed, again and again, but the automated voice was all he got. Tristan sank onto a plastic chair in the waiting room. He waited from noon until midnight before the medical team called back. Mr. Carter, a local hospital admitted a female patient with severe asthma and a high fever this afternoon. Tristan's body went rigid. The day before, he had been so focused on Sienna that he had forced me to carry heavy bags in the pouring rain. Is she okay? Tristan demanded, his heart hammering against his ribs. There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. They couldn't revive her. She's gone. The corridor of the municipal morgue smelled of industrial disinfectant and frozen iron. Tristan stumbled through the double doors, his tailored coat rumpled his hair, damp from the storm that still raged outside. Behind him, 2 high-ranking detectives from the homicide department walked in tense, heavy silence. Mr. Carter, the chief medical examiner said, stepping back from a stainless steel table covered by a white sheet. The patient was brought in at 1:40 p.m. Respiratory arrest due to severe anaphylactic throat constriction, compounded by an acute pulmonary infection. Her lungs were completely blocked. Tristan's hands shook violently as he reached for the edge of the sheet. No, he murmured, his voice sounding brittle, as if it belonged to an old man. No, you have the wrong person. Chloe. Chloe doesn't go out alone. She has prosopagnosia. She can't navigate the city by herself. She was at our penthouse. Sir, we identified her by the emergency medical tag in her wallet and her medical history at St. Jude's, the examiner said gently. Tristan yanked the sheet back. A pale, cold face lay beneath the fluorescent lights. The skin was yellowed, the lips tinged a dark, bruised blue. Tristan's knees buckled. He slammed against the edge of the steel table, his breath catching in a dry, agonizing gasp that turned into a broken, strangled sob. Chloe. He reached out a trembling hand, touching her cold temple. Chloe, wake up. Stop playing around. I brought the oatmeal. I bought the fresh berries you like. There was no answer. The body lay motionless, unresponsive to the man who had spent 10 years treating her devotion like background noise. Mr. Carter, Detective Miller stepped forward, placing a clear plastic evidence bag on the counter. We swept your penthouse as part of the routine death investigation. We found this under the nightstand in the guest bedroom. Inside the bag sat the plastic canister of Chloe's rescue inhaler. We ran a forensic canister check, Miller said, her tone dropping into a cold, professional register. The propellant was fully discharged. But more importantly, the nozzle bore traces of high-concentration synthetic fragrance oils, specifically Velvet Rose, a luxury perfume line. Tristan froze. His head snapped toward the detective, his bloodshot eyes widening in absolute horror. Velvet Rose. That was Sienna's signature perfume. The custom fragrance she had brought back from Paris. The bottle she had been carrying when she walked out of the guest room before their wedding photo shoot. Additionally, Detective Miller continued, pulling out a tablet, the building's elevator camera captured Miss Sienna Vance entering the guest room at 11:12 a.m. holding a perfume atomizer and leaving 3 minutes later. Shortly after, Miss Vance was seen throwing a glass bottle into the building's incinerator chute. The air in the morgue seemed to vanish. Tristan's mind replayed the events of that morning in a blinding, terrifying flash. He remembered Sienna collapsing on the floor, claiming her stomach hurt right when Chloe was clutching her throat on the carpet. He remembered grabbing the inhaler from the cabinet and throwing it to Chloe before scooping Sienna into his arms and rushing out the door. He had handed his dying fiancé an empty, perfume-laced canister while carrying her murderer out in his arms. Arg. A gut-wrenching, animalistic scream tore from Tristan's throat. He slammed his fists against the stainless steel table, over and over, until his knuckles cracked and bled against the cold metal. I killed her. Tristan wept hysterically, collapsing onto his knees on the concrete floor, tearing at his hair. I killed my Chloe. I killed her. While Tristan was weeping on the cold floor of the municipal morgue 30 miles away, on the top floor of the ultra-exclusive Mercer Medical Center, the atmosphere was dead silent. The penthouse suite was a masterpiece of architectural luxury, floor to ceiling. Glass walls looking out over the rain-slicked city skyline, white marble floors, and state-of-the-art life support equipment hummed quietly in the corner. On the plush king-sized bed, a young woman lay with a clear oxygen cannula resting beneath her nose. Her cheeks were pale, but a faint, healthy pink was slowly returning to her. Seguin. Her dark lashes fluttered, and she let out a long, soft breath. I opened my eyes. The ceiling above me wasn't the water-stained plaster of the hospital ER, nor was it the sterile white panels of a morgue. It was a dark, coffered oak ceiling, bathed in the warm, golden light of a bedside lamp. You're awake. A smooth, deep baritone voice drifted from the armchair near the window. I turned my head slowly. A man sat there, wearing an impeccably tailored navy suit. His long legs were crossed, a crystal glass of amber liquid resting in his hand. His face was framed by sharp bone structure, dark, piercing eyes, and an aura of ancient, absolute authority that commanded the entire room. I couldn't see his facial features clearly. My prosopagnosia made his face appear as a soft, shifting blur of shadows and light, but the moment he leaned forward, a distinct, captivating scent filled my lungs. It was the clean, crisp scent of crushed pine needles, rain, and rare cedarwood. The exact same scent from the engagement party 6 days ago. You. I rasped, my throat raw and dry. The man from the party. Julian Mercer set his glass on the mahogany side table and stood up. He walked over to the bed, his footsteps heavy and unhurried, and sat on the edge of the mattress. He reached out, his warm, broad palm gently covering my hand. On my ring finger, the sleek diamond band sat perfectly, glowing with a soft, ambient blue light. The biometric sensor in the ring alerted my medical transport team the second your oxygen saturation dropped below 80%, Julian said softly. His thumb gently traced the back of my hand. My men broke through your penthouse balcony glass 3 minutes after Carter left with his mistress. I stared at him, my mind scrambling to piece together the chaotic timeline. The hospital, the report. I stammered. My team swapped your medical records with an unclaimed Jane Doe from the city. Charity ward who passed from acute pneumonia an hour earlier, Julian explained calmly. As far as Tristan Carter, Sienna Vance, and the entire city are concerned, Chloe Vance died yesterday afternoon. I sat up slowly, the silk sheets sliding down my chest. I looked at my hands, then at the ring on my finger, and finally up at the blurred face of the billionaire sitting beside me. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why go through all this for a woman you don't even know? A woman who can't even see your face. Julian let out a low, quiet chuckle. It was a sound full of deep, ancient warmth. He reached into his inner suit pocket, pulled out an old, faded leather-bound notebook, and set it on my lap. I recognized that notebook instantly. It was my personal sketchbook from my freshman year of college, the one I had lost in the campus library during the big winter storm 6 years ago. Page 42, Julian murmured gently. I opened the yellowed pages with trembling fingers. On page 42 was a detailed charcoal sketch of a boy sitting under a library window, holding a cup of hot peppermint tea, a small silver compass resting on his knee. Underneath the sketch, in my 18-year-old handwriting, was a single line. To the boy who stayed with me in the dark until the fever broke. I didn't see his face, but I will never forget his scent. My breath caught in my throat. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision completely. The oatmeal. I whispered, my voice breaking. The night I had the 104-degree fever in college. It wasn't Tristan who stayed up all night making recipes. Tristan Carter was at a fraternity poker game in the West District that night. Julian said, his dark eyes locking onto mine with absolute, unshakable devotion. I brought the specialists. I stayed in the library kitchen for 6 hours learning how to brew medicinal oats. And when you woke up, Sienna told you, Tristan had done it all. A tear spilled over my lashes, landing softly on the yellowed paper of the sketchbook. 10 years. For 10 years, I had built my entire life, my entire identity, and my entire devotion around a lie constructed by Sienna and Tristan. I had chased a phantom hero who had never existed, while the real man had watched from the shadows, waiting for me to break free. The 7 days. I looked up at Julian, my chest heaving with raw, overwhelming realization. You said the wedding would be in 7 days. Julian reached out, his long fingers gently wiping the tear from my cheek. Tomorrow is day 7, Chloe, Julian whispered, his voice smooth as silk and strong as iron. Your wedding gown is hanging in the dressing room. Cathedral is booked. The entire city's elite has been invited. He leaned down, his lips brushing against my forehead in a long, reverent kiss. Are you ready to show them what happens when a ghost reclaims her crown? While Chloe rested in the oceanfront sanctuary of the Mercer estate, the Carter penthouse had devolved into a living nightmare. It was 2 a.m. on the night before the 7th day. The apartment smelled of stale liquor, burnt coffee, and the foul copper tang of dried blood that had seeped into the grout of the guest bathroom tiles. Tristan sat on the edge of the master bed, holding a half-empty bottle of bourbon. He hadn't showered in 3 days. His beard was wild, his eyes sunken into dark, purple sockets. Across the room, Sienna was sitting in front of the vanity mirror, applying a thick layer of medical cream to her neck. Tristan, Sienna whimpered, putting on her soft, tragic voice. My stomach is hurting again. Can you call Dr. Richard to send over more of my pain injections? The tumor is pressing against my spine. Tristan didn't move. He didn't even lift his head. Tristan? Sienna turned around, her brows drawing together in irritation. You hear me? I'm in pain. Tristan slowly set the bourbon bottle on the nightstand. He stood up, his tall frame swaying slightly, and walked across the carpet toward her. Dr. Richard, Tristan said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. The specialist from the European Cancer Institute. The one whose bills I paid last week. Yes. Sienna nodded quickly, squeezing out 2 delicate tears. He's the only one who understands my condition. Slap. The sharp, deafening impact rang through the master bedroom like a gunshot. The force of the blow knocked Sienna clean off her vanity stool. She slammed hard against the hardwood floor, spilling her expensive makeup creams everywhere, clutching her left cheek in sheer, horror-stricken shock. Tristan, she shrieked, her voice dropping all sweet cadence, turning shrill and sharp. Are you insane? You hit a dying woman. Tristan didn't yell. He didn't rage. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a thick stack of printed documents, and threw them over her bleeding face. The papers scattered across the floorboards. They were bank transfer statements from the Swiss National Bank, alongside certified medical affidavits from the International Medical Licensing Board. Patient Sienna Vance diagnosis, normal biological function, 0 oncological markers detected. Account audit, $4. 2 million transferred to private shell entity Richard Medical LLC, for personal luxury debts. Sienna's face turned paper white. The color drained from her lips so fast she looked like a real corpse. She stammered, scrambling backward on her hands and knees. Where did you get these? Detective Miller audited your European accounts 2 hours ago, Tristan said, taking a slow, heavy step toward her, his eyes burning with a dark, murderous madness. There was no cancer. There were no tumors. There were only gambling, debts in Monaco, and a $5 million mortgage on your family's estate. He leaned down, grabbing her by her collar, hauling her up until her face was inches from his. You made me leave her, Tristan whispered, his voice cracking into a Tehifing, Haspisobi. You made me lock her in the guest room. You made me throw her inhaler away. You put perfume in her lungs. Tristan. No. Listen to me. Sienna screamed, thrashing in his grip, terror finally piercing her sociopathic armor. I did it for us. I loved you. Chloe was nothing to you. She was just a plain, blind orphan who chased you around like a dog. I am a Vance. I belong by your side. Tristan let out a dark, broken laugh. A Vance? He spat, tossing her against the base of the bed like a bag of trash. The Vances went bankrupt 3 years ago. The only real legacy in this city is the woman you murdered. He turned his back on her, walking toward the door. Where are you going? Sienna screamed from the floor, wiping blood from her lip. Tristan, you can't leave me. We're legally married. Tristan paused at the threshold, looking back at her with eyes that were entirely dead. Tomorrow is the 7th day, Tristan said softly. The day Chloe said she was getting married. I'm going to the cathedral to bring her home. The morning of the 7th day broke over the city in a blaze of brilliant, golden sunlight. The rain had vanished, leaving the sky a crisp, clear sapphire blue. At 8 a.m., the financial world was rocked by an emergency press release issued directly from the global headquarters of the Mercer conglomerate, the multi-billion-dollar energy and technology empire that controlled 40% of the continent's infrastructure. Announcement: Julian Mercer, chairman and CEO of Mercer Global, announces his marriage ceremony to Miss Chloe Vance today at the Metropolitan Cathedral. The news exploded across every social media platform, television network, and newspaper front page within minutes. Hashtag Mercer Wedding of the Century, hashtag Who is Chloe Vance, hashtag The Billionaire Bride. In the executive suite of the Carter Group, Tristan sat behind his mahogany desk. He hadn't shaved, his suit was wrinkled, and an urn filled with generic Gray ashes sat in the center of his desk, wrapped in Chloe's favorite pink silk scarf. His assistant rushed into the office, holding an gold-embossed velvet card. Mr. Carter. The assistant stammered, his face pale. An official courier from Mercer Global just delivered this to the front desk. It's a VIP invitation to the ceremony. Tristan lifted his head slowly. Mercer Global? I don't have business with Julian Mercer. Sir, look at the name of the bride on the card, the assistant whispered, setting the gold card on the desk beside the urn. Tristan's eyes landed on the gold leaf script. Julian Mercer and Chloe Vance, together in holy matrimony. Location St. Jude's. Metropolitan Cathedral, 10 a.m. Tristan froze. He stared at the name printed on the card, Chloe Vance. His heart began to hammer against his ribs with a violent, terrifying rhythm. Chloe Vance. Not Chloe Miller. Not Chloe Carter. Her original legal family name, the name she had stopped using 6 years ago. After her parents passed away. She's dead. Tristan whispered, his hands shaking so violently he nearly knocked the urn over. I went to the morgue. I saw the report. Sir, the assistant hesitated, pulling out a tablet. The hospital where the death occurred. It was acquired by Mercer Health Systems 3 days ago. The chief medical examiner who signed the release form resigned this morning and boarded a flight to London. Tristan stood up so fast his heavy leather chair flipped backward, crashing against the floorboards. He looked at the gold card. He looked at the urn sitting on his desk. The realization hit his brain like a lightning strike, shattering every last shred of his sanity. She wasn't dead. The entire medical report, the morgue visit, the empty inhaler investigation, it had all been orchestrated to cut her ties with him forever, to let him rot in the hell of his own guilt while another man claimed her as his wife. Get the car, Tristan roared, his voice echoing through the corporate tower like a wounded beast. Get the car now. The Metropolitan Cathedral of St. Jude was a majestic Gothic structure of white stone and stained glass arches, standing at the highest point of the city. Today, the cathedral was surrounded by a sea of black luxury limousines, security personnel, and hundreds of media cameras. Over 500 members of the nation's political, corporate, and high society elite filled the carved wooden pews inside. At 9:45 a.m., a black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the foot of the cathedral stairs. Tristan sprinted out of the car, shoving past security guards, his eyes bloodshot, his suit rumpled, looking like a madman crashing a royal coronation. Behind him, Sienna scrambled out of a second taxi, wearing a gaudy crimson dress, her makeup heavily applied to hide the bruise on her jaw, shouting frantically, Tristan, wait for me. You can't leave me behind. Tristan ignored her completely, bursting through the massive double oak doors of the cathedral. The heavy doors slammed open with a deafening reverberation that echoed off the vaulted stone ceilings. The entire congregation turned their heads in shock. Standing at the end of the long, velvet-carpeted aisle, beside a magnificent archway of 10,000 fresh white roses, was Julian Mercer. He looked breathtakingly regal in a custom-tailored black velvet morning coat, a silver compass lapel pin catching the light streaming through the stained glass windows. And beside him, a woman stood wearing an exquisite, hand-embroidered silk gown with a trailing 10-foot lace veil. On her head sat a delicate platinum tiara encrusted with rare pink diamonds. Chloe, Tristan screamed, his voice breaking into a ragged, desperate wail that filled the quiet sacred space. Chloe, don't do this. He took 3 frantic strides down the central aisle, but 4 broad-shouldered Mercer security guards instantly stepped out from the side pews, forming an iron wall that blocked his path. Chloe, Tristan wept, falling onto his knees against the velvet carpet, holding out his hands toward the altar. I know the truth. I know Sienna lied about the cancer. I know she emptied the inhaler. I put her away, Chloe. I brought your scarf. Please, look at me. Sienna burst into the cathedral foyer behind him, panting for breath, her face contorted in rage as she saw the luxury, the crowd, and the man standing at the altar. Tristan, get up. Sienna shrieked, grabbing his arm. She's a fraud. She faked her death to embarrass us. She's marrying him for his money. On the altar, Julian Mercer didn't flinch. He didn't look angry. He gently reached out, took the bride's hand in his, and carefully lifted the sheer lace veil back over her head. The sunlight streaming through the blue and gold-stained glass illuminated her face. It was Chloe. Her skin was glowing, her dark eyes clear, radiant, and filled with an absolute, unshakable peace. She looked stunning. A queen standing on her throne, completely restored to the beauty and grace that 10 years of emotional abuse had tried to extinguish. Chloe turned around slowly on the altar, looking down the long aisle at the 2 people kneeling and screaming in the back of the church. Chloe, Tristan choked out, tears pouring down his face as he stared at her. radiant beauty. Chloe, tell them to let me through. Emmy, it's Tristan. Chloe looked at him. Her dark eyes swept over his rumpled suit, his bloodshot eyes, his tear-stained face, and the red-dressed woman clutching his sleeve. For a long, agonizing 5 seconds, the cathedral fell into a deathly, suffocating silence. Then, Chloe turned her head slightly toward Julian, her hand resting comfortably inside his broad palm, and spoke into the lapel microphone connected to the cathedral's sound system. Her voice echoed through every corner of the vast stone hall, clear, smooth, and chillingly precise. Julian, who are those people standing in the back? The question dropped into the cathedral like an anvil falling through glass. Tristan froze. The weeping stopped in his throat. Chloe? Tristan stammered, his mouth open, his eyes bulging in utter, horror-stricken disbelief. What did you say? It's me, Tristan, your fiancé of 10 years. Chloe looked back down the aisle at him, her expression completely smooth, devoid of anger, sadness, or a single shred of recognition. I have prosopagnosia, Mr. Carter, Chloe said into the microphone, her tone polite, formal, and utterly detached, as if she were addressing a stranger who had asked for directions on the street. I don't recognize faces. And since I don't recognize your voice, your presence, or your character, to me you are a complete nobody. The surrounding high society guests erupted into hushed, shocked whispers. A nobody? Did she just completely erase Tristan Carter? Well, look at what he did to her. He left her at her own engagement party to marry that scammer. Tristan felt as though someone had driven a wooden stake straight through his chest. 10 years. For 10 years he had mocked her condition. He had called her a dog who could only recognize her husband by sniffing his clothes. He had set up a sick game, with 5 body doubles to humiliate her in front of her peers. And now, standing beside the most powerful man in the country, she had used her condition to deliver the ultimate lethal judgment. To me, you are a complete nobody. And as for the woman beside you, Julian Mercer's voice boomed through the speakers, cutting through the murmurs like a steel blade. Julian tapped his tablet on the lectern. The cathedral's massive display screens, normally used for liturgical readings, lit up in high definition. Instead of hymns, the screens displayed a series of 4K security camera feeds and audio logs. Video log, 11:12 a.m., showing Sienna Vance spraying high-concentration velvet rose perfume directly into Chloe's face while locking her inside the guest room. Audio log, 11:14 a.m. Sienna. Oh dear, Chloe. What's wrong? You look so pale. Enjoy your final breath. Bank audit statement, displaying $4.2 million stolen by Sienna Vance and Dr. Richard from the Carter Group's medical charity escrow. The congregation let out a collective, deafening gasp of horror. Sienna's face turned from pale white to a terrifying mottled purple. Dropped her designer purse, backing away toward the heavy double doors, her hands shaking violently. No. This is a setup. Sienna shrieked hysterically. Security. Call my lawyers. Your lawyers were arrested 30 minutes ago at the airport, Miss Vance. A stern voice announced from the back of the cathedral. 4 federal agents and 2 uniformed homicide detectives marched down the aisle, holding official warrants. Sienna Vance, Detective Miller announced loudly, pulling out a pair of steel handcuffs. You are under arrest for attempted first-degree premeditated murder, corporate wire fraud, extortion, and tampering with life-saving medical equipment. Tristan, save me, Sienna screamed as the cold iron cuffs clicked around her manicured wrists. She thrashed wildly, kicking at the officers as they dragged her backward down the stone steps. Tristan, tell them I'm your wife. Tell them. Tristan didn't even look at her. He sat on his knees in the aisle, his eyes glued to Chloe on the altar. The detectives didn't stop with Sienna. Detective Miller walked up to Tristan, placing a firm, heavy hand on his shoulder. Tristan Carter, Miller said coldly. You are being brought in for questioning. As a primary co-conspirator in the corporate embezzlement of $4.2 million and for reckless endangerment resulting in near-fatal bodily harm. Tristan didn't resist. He let the officers pull him to his feet. As they turned him around to lead him out of the cathedral, he looked back over his shoulder one last time. He saw Julian Mercer take Chloe's left hand, slide a breathtaking, flawless 10-carat pink diamond band onto her finger, and lean down to kiss her lips in front of the cheering, applauding congregation. He saw Chloe smile, that soft, radiant, beautiful smile that used to belong to him, as she wrapped her arms around her real husband's neck, lost in a world where he no longer existed. Tristan's knees gave out again, and the officers had to drag his weeping, broken body out through the doors into the flashing cameras of the waiting world. 6 months later, the winter snow fell softly over the concrete walls of the state maximum security correctional facility. In the visitation room, Sienna Vance sat behind a thick acrylic partition. Her long, styled hair was gone, cut short into a dull, greasy bob. She wore an oversized orange jumpsuit. Her face was gaunt, pale, and marked by a dark scar along her left jawline from a prison fight 2 weeks ago. The phone receiver on her side buzzed. She picked it up with a trembling hand, her eyes shining with a frantic, desperate spark as she looked through the glass. On the other side sat a public defender, a tired-looking young man with a battered briefcase. "Where is Tristan?" Sienna demanded into the phone, her voice raspy and thin. "Did he sign the bail appeal? Did he send the money for my legal team?" The public defender let out a long, weary sigh. "Miss Vance," the lawyer said softly, "the Carter Group declared total bankruptcy 3 months ago after the Mercer conglomerate executed its debt default clauses. All of Mr. Carter's personal and corporate assets have been seized by federal liquidators." Sienna's breath caught in her throat. "What? What about his penthouse?" "Auctioned off last week," the lawyer replied. Mr. Carter himself was sentenced to 4 years in a federal minimum security facility yesterday after pleading guilty to corporate negligence and tax compliance failure. Sienna dropped her head against the acrylic glass, letting out a terrible, muffled scream of pure, hopeless ruin. Meanwhile, in the historic district of the city, at the corner of 5th Avenue and Oak Street, a man in a threadbare gray coat sat on a wooden park bench under the falling snow. He had a messy, unkempt beard, hollow cheeks, and dark, vacant eyes that stared blankly at the passing traffic. In his lap he held a small, worn plastic canister, an empty inhaler he had found in a trash bin 3 months ago. It was Tristan. He didn't have a car. He didn't have an apartment. He lived on a small monthly stipend provided by a court-appointed trustee after his release on bail pending his appeal. Every single day for 3 months, he sat on this exact bench outside the entrance of the Mercer Global headquarters, waiting for a white car to pass. Whenever a woman wearing a white coat or a pink scarf walked by, he would scramble off the bench, running up to her with frantic, desperate eyes, calling out, "Chloe, Chloe, look at me. I bought the oatmeal. I have the flowers." The women would look at him with disgust and fear, stepping away quickly, calling for security. And Tristan would sit back down on his cold wooden bench, clutching the empty inhaler against his chest, weeping into the freezing wind until his tears froze against his skin. He had everything money could buy: wealth, social power, corporate prestige. And he had thrown it all into the fire to chase a cheap, plastic lie, leaving himself trapped forever in an empty, silent world where the only woman who had ever loved him couldn't even remember his face. Spring arrived in the coastal hills of the Mercer estate 6 months later. The ocean breeze blew soft and warm through the open French doors of the glass conservatory, carrying the sweet, intoxicating scent of thousands of blooming white gardenias and pink roses. I sat on a plush velvet sofa near the window, wearing a comfortable silk sundress, reading a book on botanical architecture. Footsteps sounded from the doorway, steady, heavy, and familiar. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to look at his face. I closed my book, smiled, and breathed in the deep, comforting scent of rain, pine, and clean cedar wood that filled the air around me. Julian stepped up behind the sofa, leaning down to wrap his long, warm arms gently around my waist, resting his chin against the top of my head. "Still reading about gardenias, Mrs. Mercer?" he murmured, his deep voice sending a pleasant shiver down my spine. "I'm planning the new greenhouse layout," I smiled, leaning my head back against his shoulder, reaching up to touch his face, feeling the sharp line of his jaw, the smooth skin of his cheek, the warm, steady pulse at his neck. I couldn't see his facial features clearly in the bright sunlight. To my eyes, his face was still a soft, beautiful, glowing blur of light. But I didn't care. I didn't need a photograph to know who he was. I didn't need a face-blind test to find him in a crowd. I knew the hand that held mine in the dark. I knew the voice that had promised me a home when my world was falling apart. And I knew the heart that had waited 6 long years just to give me 7 days of light. Julian leaned down, his lips finding mine in a long, sweet, passionate kiss that tasted of warm sunshine and forever. "I love you, Chloe," he whispered against my skin. "I love you, Julian," I murmured back, wrapping my arms tight around his neck. Under the clear, endless blue sky, the nightmare was over, and my world was finally perfectly whole.